Okay, we'll really start now. So good evening, and thank you for joining us for the May Successful Gardener class. We're recording, and you heard all of that, so you saw how the sausage is made there in some crazy way. But do mute your line during the presentation. I'm Christina Culp. I'm one of the Master Gardeners in Union County, and we host the Successful Gardener series at 7 o'clock on the first Thursday of every month, except December. We give you a month off around Christmas. Next month, Dr. Matt Bertone, who is an entomologist, will join us to discuss insects. And when I talked to him about the topic, I wanted him to talk about the good guys versus the bad guys. And he said that was going to take more than an hour. So expect to stay a little bit later if you want the full report. He said this was probably something we could talk about for weeks and months and years, but we're going to try our best. So that should help us be able to identify some of the good bugs in our gardens as well as some of the bad ones, so we know who to do what to, I guess. Anyway, make sure you register on our website, and that's at mastergardenersunioncountync.org, and you'll be able to find the rest of the link, and the whole Successful Gardener calendar is out there as well. We'll add the links to the chat box here as soon as I stop talking. Our website has all kinds of plant information in there. You could probably hang out there for quite a while. So have a look around and see what you find that's interesting. And if you think of some topic that you would like us to cover on our website or in our Successful Gardener series, please send us an email. There's a way to do that on the website. And we would love to hear what you think. Also, if you're interested in becoming a Master Gardener, there's a lot of information there as well on how to become a Master Gardener. It's not too hard, but it's not really easy either. So it makes it worthwhile to do. We have a lot of fun and get a lot of fun work done. The Successful Gardener series is one of those things. Tonight, Ian Schaller is going to discuss fertilizing. And, we've all probably spent the last month or so planting our little brains out, but now we got to start taking care of all those plants, and fertilization is one of the important parts there. And so he's going to talk about when to fertilize, how to fertilize, and with what to fertilize. That's a poor piece of English there. I met him through Organic Grower School, Diana McCall. I'd taken a class with her, and she suggested that Ian would be a great person to talk about this topic. He worked in the legendary Dr. John Wilson Community Garden in Black Mountain, and has now run off to California to work at a different farm and apparently be chilly because it's a lot colder there than it is here, and probably colder than it is in Black Mountain as well. We will take your questions in the chat box as we usually do and field those toward the end of the hour. And this recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and I will send a link out to everyone and post it on the Facebook page. So let's get started. I will let you go ahead and share your screen.
All right.
Hopefully it works just as well as it did yesterday.
Right. How's that?
Hasn't happened yet. There it's going. Yay.
Okay. Let me just move you guys around so that you're not in the way of my buttons.
Okay. And it is showing not the full screen yet there.
Yeah.
I'm going to put our links in here. And I will mute myself so you don't hear me.
Good. Is that pretty good? Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, for showing up this evening. I'm very excited about this topic. I've been reading through this book and putting this class together for a good while now, and it's been a great way to stay accommodated with this awesome knowledge. So I guess we'll jump right into it. So I think we have a sort of like old model of how we used to think of plants. And that old model is, there's soil and then there's a plant, and the plant puts its roots in and grabs minerals from the soil and pulls them to the plant. And as long as we get good production and growth in the plant, then we're happy, right? However, there are some issues with this sort of one-way flow model, and that is that it's more complex than that. This old plant model, this one-way flow, leaves out the fact that soil and the life in the soil is very important, and for a lot of reasons that I'm about to talk about. And if we want to make veggies that are healthier for a longer amount of time, if we want to have veggies that taste better and have a soil that's going to keep producing those veggies for a long amount of time, we need to take the soil and the life in the soil um, into consideration when creating these amendments. And so this new model is going to examine like how our mineral content in our soil, which is obviously important, but also the life in the soil and the nutrient pathways in the plant. It's going to take all those things in consideration as one new model. And some interesting fact. I don't know if you guys have heard about the brick scale. It's actually a way of measuring the sugar content in your plants, and so you can buy like a refractometer. I haven't tried this out myself, but you can get a refractometer, and then you can squeeze this out of the plants, and then it'll measure the sugar content in your plant. And the higher the sugar content in your plant, the more pest resistant it'll be, the better it's going to taste, the more nutrients and complex compounds like antioxidants it's going to provide. So yeah, we want all of those things. And so this is why we have to take into consideration what's in the ground and not just what's coming from the ground. So let's talk about minerals for a second. I think we all can agree that yeah, we've heard of nitrogen and phosphorus and calcium, all of those nutrients being important. But something we need to consider is that those minerals need to be in the right proportion, um, and that we may be overdoing it on some and not on others. So a good thing to do is to do a soil sample test, and then once you get your soil sample, your test results back, then you can start to take these amendments that I'm going to talk about, and you can look at the numbers of, how much manganese, how much copper, how much boron, all these like these tiny, I guess like trace minerals you can call them that we need to include as well. Um, and so, yeah, we know the responsible growth, and we know that we're going to be using very small amounts of these minerals, actually in like the parts per million, especially with things like the copper and manganese, like these really small trace minerals. Let me see, and then exchange capacity. So the forms that these minerals are going to be in are in cations and anions. I don't know if anybody remembers those from high school chemistry. Yeah. But if it's a cation, that means it has one less electron, and therefore has a slightly positive charge. And if it's an anion, then it has a slightly negative charge because it has an extra electron. And so these all these cations and anions are running around in the soil, um, and it's the charge of like our plant essentially, and like magnetism that are drawing these forces, these minerals up into the plant. So the higher our exchange capacity in the soil, the longer that your plant is going to be able to retain and utilize minerals in the soil. So we're probably familiar with our tomato plant coming to the end of the season and just like not producing the same, starting to yellow out. Pests are starting to get on it because it's not as healthy. Well, if if we keep our exchange capacity high, which I'll talk about in the next slide, like how to do that, then that's not going to happen. We're going to have our plants healthier for a longer amount of time. So exchange capacity, hugely important. And there was something I wanted to touch on with that. It'll come back to me. All right, so we talked about the minerals. So now let's talk a little bit about the life forms in the soil. There are soil builders, as I like to think of them. In this picture, it's got a, here, I'll zoom in on it real quick so that way we can take a bit of a look. So we got our nematodes, and we have some bacteria and the mycorrhizal hyphase, which is like a fungi, amoebas. All these guys are a giant food web. And what's happening is like the big guys are eating the little guys, and then the big guys are pooping out hummus. So I forgot how you say it, but and that humus is going to it's what's holding on to those cations and anions in the soil. So the higher your humus, I'm gonna keep doing that the whole time. Sorry, guys. The higher that content, the more your soil is holding on to these nutrients. So if we can add amendments to the soil that are feeding these biological forces, then we are increasing our plant's exchange capacity. Let me zoom out for a second. And some I think you guys had a soil class recently, so you may already know some of these, but by doing this, we are going to increase the oxygen flow in our soil, how much water is retained in the humus, and also, like again, the exchange capacity, how many ions it's able to hold on to. Not just like right now in this moment, like it has like a bigger capacity in this moment, but throughout the season. So we're going to produce more for longer, and it's going to be healthier plants. Um, so plants and fungi have an incredible relationship, and science is just pouring out with this, and it's really fascinating this symbiosis that they have going on. So these mycorrhizal, there we go, hyphae. They so you can imagine a plant's root system, and then you can imagine sort of like thinner hairs that are coming off, and they're going deeper into the soil in different directions. And those are your hyphae, the fungi. And those hyphae are actually acting as an extended root system, and they're pulling up nutrients from deeper in the soil. They're pulling up water from deeper in the soil, and they're also creating this communication circle with all the plants that are around it to warn about disease and pests that might be affecting one another. So it's like a telephone line. So again, these are just something to keep in mind when you're adding these amendments that we need to build the soil and the life within it. Oh, now let's talk quickly about xylem and phloem. So, master gardeners, maybe you've heard of it. It's something I'm relatively recently learning about. So, you have xylem, and that is, I'll click on this photo again. So, xylem, if you can see my mouse, is working only upwards, right? So, it's pulling things from the roots up into the leaves, all right? So, that is the flow of nutrients with xylem, and this is heavily affected with or by the sunlight and temperature and humidity because there's also a calcium chamber between the xylem and the phloem, and so the xylem flow, so like um, the cycles of the sun are affecting the overall energy between the xylem and the phloem. The phloem, you can think of it's sending nutrients in all directions, but to um, the plant's sinks. And by what I mean by that is the plant's places of growth. So these are new roots, new leaves, new fruits, and when it's getting ready for the reproductive stage to like the seeds. Um, this is important because you want to kinda get in this cycle of, like, when you're amending, and then you're also gonna think about which, energy system is gonna be more efficient to amend in each moment. Because so, like, calcium and manganese, for example, they don't do really well, being moved around by the phloem chamber, but they do great by the xylem chamber. So if your plant really needs calcium, then you're going to want to drench the soil so that the xylem can pump it up into the leaves. And again, this is going to be different throughout the day, but generally, the best time to amend, and I haven't got to applying amendments, but we can mention this later. But generally, the best time to add your amendments is going to be in the morning because the sun is acting as a sort of trigger to pull everything up from the roots and in the leaves into the plant itself. All right. So that's our new model. That's incorporating the minerals, the life forms, and the new energy pathways. So let's get to the exciting part and let's talk about how to make some of these amendments, and then we'll get on to applying them. So I got a list here of materials that you're gonna want for these four amendments. So we're gonna have a water extraction amendment, vinegar extraction, a a fermented plant juice, which you're gonna use brown sugar for, and a leaf mold extract. So you may be wondering, good water, what's that? Good water. So our water is chlorinated if you're living in town, if you're getting your water from a town source. If you have well water, you're actually in the clear. You might want to get it. You could get it tested if you were concerned. But the chlorine in the water is actually going to kill off the live organisms that are on our plant material that we're going to essentially ferment in order to make these extractions. So we don't want chlorine to kill off that bacteria because, as we've seen, there's some good reasons to have bacteria in the soil and on our plants. And then weeds. We're gonna, instead of just putting all the weeds in the compost, we're gonna utilize these to make these amendments. Um, Feel free to put in the chat box, and we can talk about it at the end. But maybe put in some like common weeds. I think the one that I'm gonna reference here the most is just gonna be dandelions because they're everywhere. There's no shortage of them. And what's awesome about it is they are a broad spectrum mineral accumulator. So they have the deep taproot, so dip, di- uh, they're dipping down deep into the soil, and they're pulling up tons of nutrients. And so they have actually they contain amounts of every mineral that your plants that your plants need, just in varying amounts. So it might have like more magnesium than one thing, but not another. So good water, weeds, unwanted fruit. So if you got a peach tree, and you just got like an abundance of fruit, and then some of those guys are laying on the grounds and just not looking the best, not ready for consumption, sort of unwanted. Keep those, and then we are going to put those to use later on. Bones, cow bones, chicken bones, eggshells, oyster shells, leaf mold, um, organic apple cider vinegar. I just put vinegar here, but definitely do organic apple cider vinegar. Organic again because we don't want anything sprayed on there that's going to interfere with the livelihood of our microbiota. Organic brown sugar because that's going to feed our microbiota, and then just some containers. Mason jars are typically what I use, but any glass thing will work. Large buckets, that kind of thing. So let's take a look at water extractions. So what you'll need, the good water, a bucket, and I should put here, it says plant material. Um, as you're doing this, it might be helpful to keep like a sort of journal and just keep track of the weeds that you are using, and the weeds that are successful to apply these minerals, these amendments, and the ones that are not successful. So you might want to like start with one. Um, some other, I don't know if you guys have purslane. Do you have purslane? Do you have chickweed? Yep. So all three of those, so dandelion, purslane, chickweed, are all great weeds that you can use for these mineral extractions, and they're pretty broad spectrum. So yeah, what I'm saying is just be kind of more scientific about it and test one thing out at a time. So take those materials, get your bucket, stuff the plants in there, cover it with water, and then let it sit for about 3 days, covered and out of direct sunlight. And within 3 days, you're going to have a biological amendment. It was simple as that. And then you can take that top layer, and essentially you're going to see like the sort of like the air bubbles and like the foamy kind of stuff at the top. And you're going to take that and you're going to dilute it 1 to 10 or 1 to 30. Um, all this information is coming from the Regenerative Growers Guide by Nigel Palmer. And the reason he gives you those sort of ranges is just so that you can tailor even more so what nutrients and how much you're applying based on your soil tests. So, and then you can take that diluted with good water, of course, and you can apply it to the foliage or to the soil drench. Um, My intuition says that like we should probably just, if it's a biological amendment, apply it to the soil because that's where you have the most biology. And you're sort of like sending it into like a soup of more biology. However, again, experiment, try it as a foliage as well. Now, that's just after the first 3 days that's a biological amendment. After about 2 weeks, your plant has broken down and it's starting to release the minerals that are trapped in the leaves. And so once you can kind of dual purpose this, you can first get your biological amendment and then you can get your mineral amendment. And so you're going to capture both. Um, yeah. And I think all of these extractions can be done multiple times. Thank you for adding that. Um, especially if you add something like apple cider vinegar to further break down the nutrients. So keep that in mind as well. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So things to know. Yeah, we said biological and mineral. The smell. I'm sure if you've done a water extraction before, you know that quickly it gets a very unpleasant smell. So, this might not be an issue for everyone, but maybe your neighbors aren't into it, that kind of thing. So, after about 2 weeks, for sure, it's going to get a pretty gnarly smell. But that doesn't mean it's bad for your plants. Your plants don't have noses. All right, vinegar extractions. So this is our second one. I apologize. There's two photos in here that I added and they came in sideways. So for this vinegar extract, um, your choice. You can do eggs, eggshells, excuse me, any kind of bones, shells, oyster shells, whatever. And with all of these resources, try and get a little creative. Like, you can go to your restaurant and find excess bones or oyster shells if you're close to a seafood place. And just like those people aren't going to use them, and you just help closing the waste gap and like stretch this stuff a bit farther. And then so take that material. You're going to take about 15% of the material and then to like almost like 4 times with the apple cider vinegar in your jar, and leave a little headspace because so on here, I did not do the proper ratios. I'll click on it. I'm sorry, it's sideways. On here, I did not do the proper ratios. I actually just like covered it in apple cider vinegar, and there was a lot of eggs, a lot of eggshells that I had. First, I had baked in the oven to cook off all the excess moisture, and then yeah, stuffed them in the jar and covered it up apple cider vinegar. Within about 5 minutes, when I had walked away, this thing was overflowing, because of the reaction between the acid and something in the eggshell. I don't know if it's the calcium or what. So when you do this, definitely put this jar within a bowl, something like that to catch it. And then you're gonna let it sit for 2 weeks, actually. And then you can decant it. So just open it up, pour it into a different jar, and then dilute it 1 to 500. So these again, this can last you like a long time or go a long way depending on how many plants you have to spray. But that's what's awesome about it is it takes a little bit more effort to make this than it does to go to the store and just buy a bag of packaged pre-made stuff. But this is going to go farther and close a lot more waste gaps for you. Um, yeah, and again, this can be extracted multiple times. So after you take that liquid off, you can keep going. And he didn't say how many times, but you might just like keep in it maybe 4 or 5 times before you just switch to a new one. Cool. This one's my personal favorite. Again, those pictures are sideways and weird. But so you guys don't have stinging nettle. Um, but this is stinging nettle in a jar that was I put gloves on first and then I added brown sugar and massaged it up until it starts to create a sort of juices. The sugar is actually helping to pull out the moisture content from the plant that you're going to use. And then I labeled it, to, just be a little bit more precise on that kind of thing, but I should probably stick to this. Let me see. So make sure it's organic brown sugar, and then pick the leaves in the early morning when there's lots of dew on the leaves. because this was a I picked a fair amount, probably half a pound of stinging nettle, and you can see how much it broke down. That's in a liter mason jar, and it broke down a lot. Um, and learn from my mistakes. Pick the leaves in the morning and pick them early in the season if you can. Like right now would be a great time to start doing your dandelions, while they still have some energy and moisture in the leaves themselves. Um, but if it is more dry, you're just going to do more sugar. So you're going to do about 3 parts sugar to 2 parts plant material. Um, and then you're going to let that sit, after you massage them all down. And you'll keep an eye on it that day and look for like this brown liquid that'll like settle at the bottom of the jar. You might be tempted to squeeze it or like push it really hard down to get more juice out of it. Don't worry about that. It'll do its thing. Um, and then you're gonna leave that for a week, like that just continually breaking down. And then you're gonna get this like syrupy stuff, and it smells really nice actually. It's very different from the leaf extract in that way. It's got a pleasant smell to it. And then let's see. Again, I'm so sorry it's upside down, but you can kind of see these like wiggly lines. That's where like the liquid was. The moisture content wasn't super high because I made the mistake of not picking in the morning. So don't make my mistake because then it doesn't go as far. I think I only got a gallon out of these guys, and it should have been a lot more, as you can see. 1 to 500. I put like a tablespoon. I got a couple of gallons out of it, but 1 to 500 is basically a tablespoon in a gallon, somewhere like roughly. And then I applied that as a foliar spray at the Dr. John Wilson's community garden. Um, yeah, and so that is going to be primarily. Let me see. I think I go over this later too, but I think that's primarily a mineral amendment. All right, leaf mold. Leaf mold is gold. Okay, so if you don't know what leaf mold is, if you, we probably all do, but just real quick, go into like your backyard if you got some woods, or if you have like a big pile of leaves that's been sitting for a year or two, and if you go to the bottom of that pile, you're gonna see the stuff that's like really broken down, has tons of holes in it. It's almost like muddy, crumbly dirt stuff. That's your leaf mold. Um, so leaf mold, he said rainwater specifically for this one, and I think that might just be an added sort of biological element, but you could do good water again, just like the non-chlorinated water. So add your leaf mold, your water, and then again your specific plant. So this could work for your peaches, your blackberries, blueberries, or you could do your broad spectrum chickpea, dandelion, parsley. And then you're going to submerge it all. Um, so submerge the plant material and then add just a handful of leaf mold in like a 5-gallon bucket. And then cover and keep it dry. And you're gonna let that sit over winter. Actually, this is the longer amendments, but this is one of the more potent ones. And you can dilute that with water 1 to 20. And then things to keep an eye out for are just don't let it freeze. And good thing to know: the longer you let it sit, the more the plants are going to break down, and the more mineral content it's going to have. Um, and then again, that'll be a soil drench or a foliar spray. So spray it on the leaves or drench the soil with it. Okay, so those are our 4 amendments. Um, this book has a lot more. I'm going to give you the link to buy that book because it's pretty excellent. But here are like the 4 very simple ones that I wanted to talk about today. Now, how do we apply those? So what is going to get these amendments? Soil, for reasons that I talked about at the beginning, to improve the how much minerals are in the soil, feed the biology, and help with that energy exchange. Distress plants. So if you're starting to see little insects, which I'm sure you guys talk more about next month, if you're starting to see signs of that, it might be a good time to add an amendment because I think I said at the beginning, if you have a plant with a high brick score, they should have no pest and no disease. Well, specifically no pest because the insects that are usually going for plants are going for ones with the low sugar content because their stomach can break those down. Whereas if they have the high sugar content, the insects cannot break these down and they will not try and chew on your cabbage. But also, we're going to put them on our healthy plants too, to prevent pests and to meet nutritional needs throughout the growing season, and to improve the flavor and health benefits. So, especially if your humus levels, like the tilt of your soil, isn't up to where you want it yet, that's going to be it's going to be more important for someone like that to apply amendments regularly to consistently meet the nutritional needs and hit all those phases of growth for the plant. And you can also add it to your compost, especially the biological amendments. So your water extraction and your leaf mold, you can add those to your compost, and it'll help to feed the organisms that are already breaking down the compost and speed up the process to get that heat level up. So that's what we can um, apply our amendments to. Oh, I mean, this can go to our vegetables, our fruit trees, even if you just have like a perennial plant. Like every plant can accept, a little bit of love from some dandelion or leaf mold. And when, so we're past early spring. However, essentially at like the end of the season and at the beginning of the season, it's a good idea to add biological amendments, to give those guys a good foothold in the door for the beginning of the season or at the end of the season. At or before planting, you can add these amendments. So for the water extraction, when it's in that 3-day period, um, you can add that 2 weeks before you plant. Again, you're adding it 2 weeks before because you're just giving it a chance to, like, colonize in that area and for, the critters to eat up the bacteria and kinda get accommodated with the soil before you plant things. And then at planting, it's a great idea to do minerals. So just like you would add your compost or you would add like sprinkle your lime or whatever, it's a good idea to do at or before. So you're kind of going to do it a lot, and consistently throughout the season. That's going to be the key, even every 7 to 10 days. So again, that's just meeting the needs as like the season goes on, and to improve soil health, like I guess as quickly as possible to get that exchange capacity and Um, yeah. So and then seed soaking, this one's kinda up for grabs. I'm sure you know that seeds come in these awesome little packages and they have everything that they need to sprout and to grow. And it's not until they start to get like their roots in the soil and start pulling other things that they need other nutrients or once they get into like their photosynthetic phase. However, Nigel suggests that in order to give the seeds like an optimal chance, that you soak them in a mineralized amendment for 10 to 15 minutes before planting. And he talks about how, obviously with like a brassica seed, they're really tiny. So you would probably plant first and then do the soaking. Um, but, with something with a larger seed, you can actually just drop it in and then kind of like pick it out carefully. So yeah, so when it's in the vegetative stage, things like lettuce, kale, collards, cabbage, all those like big leafy greens, their growth very much depends on photosynthesis. So you can add things like what was it? I had this written down. Things like magnesium, iron, manganese, and phosphorus are all very important for like its photosynthesis. So ensuring that the leafy greens can um, optimize the sunlight that they're getting. And then right before the reproductive stage, it's important to add calcium. So doing that soil drench with, let's say you did an eggshell, the vinegar extraction. Doing a soil drench with calcium would be a great way to ensure that you're getting ample amounts of fruit production, um, if you're collecting seeds, all of that. And this isn't something I have a ton of knowledge on. But yeah,
Ian our speaker?
sorry.
Is Ian our speaker? Okay.
This isn't something I know a ton about, but just plants needing specific minerals at different times in their life cycle. But it's something I would like to learn more about, and I encourage you guys to because then you'll have a better idea of what amendments to add at what time. So we got the what, the when. Let's talk about how. Um, Real simple here. We have our soil drench, so just covering the the rooted areas. The foliar spray, taking like a lighter, like a mist, because and just quickly going over and like letting like the little droplets capture on the leaves, and then, um, oh yeah, let's see. So for fruit trees, I'm gonna take a step back. Um, in the fall, before the leaves fall, that's when you should add, amendments. It's a great time to add amendments. You can add throughout the season, but that's a really good time to do it too, before the leaves fall. But if you miss that chance and the leaves have fallen, you can add it to the bark. So that's just I just want to add that in there. Um, yeah, so maybe there'll be some more questions about that, but that's pretty straightforward. Um, well, maybe let's see. When I'm thinking about, like, transplants and that kinda thing, like, if you're about to, transplant from a container to the ground, it might be a good idea to drench, like, the hole, so fill the hole with your amendments, and then you can plant. Um, Talked about seed soaking. Yeah. Alright. That was my applying? Oh, wow, okay. So, I am open for questions.
So one question here, and you probably had this problem in Black Mountain as well. We have clay soil, right? I mean,
Mhm,
so drenching the soil is not hard because it just sits there. And most of us have added tons of compost and all this stuff, and we've made it better. But still, at the end of the day, and at the bottom of the hole is clay. So,
mhm.
how do we? Maybe that's not a problem. Clay's got a lot of minerals in it, so that's the good part of clay. And if it's dry, it held water as long as it could. But does that change how you apply like a soil drench? Do you have to be more careful with that?
Yeah, I would say if it's running off, it's definitely not being effective, right? Um, so I think like depending on the the stage of the plant's growth, like how far the roots might be out, it could be very much worth your time to kind of like take like a digging knife or something and just kind of crack around it, or even create like a little burrow around, and then apply the drench and just let it slowly go down. Because I mean, like in my head, I'm picturing like super dense clay that is just like just basically just sitting on top of it.
Mhm.
Um,
It's
is that
usually not that
helpful?
bad, or you
Not
wouldn't
that
be
bad.
planting anything on it, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Right, right, right. Is that helpful?
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking like a potato fork, right? In
Mhm.
around.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or a hori knife, do you know that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I live that thing doesn't leave my side.
They're the
Um,
best.
As far as spraying, foliar spray, I have heard. Well, no, I won't say what I've heard. Do you spray the top, the bottom, both of the leaves? Or does
Yeah,
it matter?
I don't think it matters. I think, you know,
Because it's
I'm
harder
thinking
to
it's sort
get
of like
underneath, right? You end up spraying yourself more than
what's that?
to get underneath a leaf is a little harder. Spraying this way than to spray right on top.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, whenever even if we just do like fish emulsion, it's never been like a thought to try and get underneath
okay,
that kind of thing. So on top, that's a valid question. Yeah, just on top the leaf is fine. Yeah, because that's where the sun's gonna hit it anyway. So I would think it has like the pores on top
okay,
there to sort of like open up, and take that in.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
I'm just taking over with the questions. So anybody add some questions or just come on your just unmute yourself and ask. I've got a couple more though. I assume, and maybe it doesn't matter, that with these plants that we're pulling up that we called weeds yesterday, and now we're going to call fertilizer, and I get that, and that's a wonderful problem. we don't want to add, we don't want them to have seeds with them, right? So we don't want to include the seed heads in that.
Right. So you are, it wouldn't matter actually because you're not going to add that like back to the soil.
True, you're
You're
going to
sh-
kind of
you're going to strain it.
strain it.
You're going to
Right.
strain it and dilute it. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't put that in the slides. Because I guess my thought process was if it's going in a sprayer, the seed's going to clog it up, so I have to strain it before I can do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked them because I just wasn't processing that. And there may be something useful in those seeds, as a matter of fact. And God knows it would be nice to use them for something good instead
Totally,
of just
totally.
making more weeds.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of some of the, and I wish somebody would help me, guys. Some of the other common weeds around here. I don't always know their names. I just know I don't want them. But chickweed, and you mentioned purslane is definitely one. Dandelions, everybody's got those. We have yellow dock for sure, and a couple other kinds of dock. Um, is there anything good that comes from a thistle? Because I have some of those,
Yeah.
and they're
Okay, real
big.
quick. Let me go show you this. Dr. Duke's phytochemical and ethnobotanical databases. This is the link. Sorrel's fine. I think thistle would be fine. But this link, this guy has a huge catalog. I think there's like 2,000 pages of like the seemingly every plant, and it shows you their mineral content by
Perfect.
plant. Yeah. So if you have a question about a specific plant, you can go to that website and check it out. I
Oh, that
saw
is
in the chat box
fantastic.
that someone asked if there's some you can't use or you shouldn't use. I mean, maybe maybe like poison ivy. Like I really don't know. There probably is some, but I don't think it's any of the common weeds that we're gonna see a lot. And if you're curious, you can. Oh, gotcha. Um, if you're curious, yeah, I would reference this phytochemical ethnobotanical database. Yeah,
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I mean, that's what we'll all be doing this evening now.
yeah,
And I did want to make sure I had to ask Debbie on the side there if stinging nettle was native. Well, I didn't ask if it was native, if we had it at all. But yeah, I'm sure people have planted it. I just have a problem planting something that wants to attack me. But whatever, it seems to be
yeah.
really useful. And I'm guessing that once you plant it, it's very happy here is my guess, but I don't know. Um,
Yeah. And I think it grows by, I might be wrong, but it might be grow by root runners. So
Oh,
like it
Lord,
can
yeah,
get
then
pretty
maybe grow
pervasive.
it in a pot away from
Yeah.
everything else. So we did have a
Some
question a ways back, and this was when you were doing the water extraction. What is the water to plant ratio? You had it for the vinegar, but we didn't have it for the water.
I think it's 1 to 10 and 1 to 30.
Oh, I thought that was after you've done it. She was talking about the making of it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Let me look. I have my book right here.
Well, and it says to cover it. So I guess if you
Yeah,
cover it, you cover. I mean, right? So it's however much you've got, and you cover it.
exactly. Sorry, it won't take me very long to find this.
I have a feeling that most of this is not very precise science, and not in a
It's
bad
it's
way. It's
it's
just
totally not. And it's funny because Nigel
it's not going to
Palmer,
hurt anything.
yeah, Nigel Palmer is actually an aerospace engineer by trade.
Oh, good
So
lord!
it's funny that it's not super precise. And he says there is no precise right amount of plant material to use. Filling the bucket about 3/4 full works well, and then fill the bucket with rainwater or another type of good water. And so, yeah, someone did ask this, like a majority of this information came from this book, which the link, if you want it, because I'm in love with this book and I'll reference it a lot. And it references a lot of other good books to kind of dive more into this way of thinking. So there's the link to that.
Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, both of these links are fantastic to use. Okay, let's make sure I've got. So somebody mentioned sorrel,
Yeah.
and that's a good one. There's shepherd's purse. I know, and I'm trying to think of a couple other ones.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, and Debbie says, yes, that stinging nettle does grow on runners' rhizomes. So, yeah, I
because
don't
we
want to.
had, oh my gosh, we had like we could have had a whole bed of just stinging nettle. Like that's how much we had around the periphery of our the Dr. John Wilson's community garden.
Yeah, yeah. Why do I have a feeling that it would be even crazier here? Okay. Any more questions, guys? Do you have any? Both of these links are fantastic, though. Now I'm gonna have to go buy a book and play with this website. I'm just waiting for questions. I think I had one more. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, leaf mold. We usually get some of that at our teaching garden, and we
Mhm.
love that stuff. And so I'm wondering if a lazier way of doing the leaf mold thing is in the fall of the year, can you just take the leaf mold and put it around the plants and kind of let it happen on its own, right? Without putting it in a bucket and stinking up the house.
Yeah, no, I think that is that would be essentially like mulching, right?
Yeah.
And that's another reason I would recommend this book because it talks about other practices besides just amending. It talks a lot about the importance of mulching and like letting that like leaves or mulch specifically, and that itself is feeding the biology, and like that's like amending your soil. I mean, it is amending your soil.
Well, I
Um,
heard someone say, actually, his name is Kelly Norris. He wrote New Naturalism, I think, and he's a
mm,
big proponent of growing meadows, basically in your front yard. But he's a landscape designer, so they're pretty meadows. But he was just kind of offhandedly said, no plant evolved living in mulch. That there's no that doesn't work in real world. But they do grow living in leaf mulch, right? Leaves and leaf mold and all of that stuff. So that's
mhm.
more, you know,
But
coherent
thank you for
to their function as a.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Is it okay if one of the methods is applied? Oh, or do you need to do all of them? Can you do one method or all of? Or is it going to hurt to do them all? Or is it going to hurt to do one of these methods you talk about?
mm,
Um, all by itself. Is that going to be a problem if you just did the vinegar
right,
situation
right.
and not?
That's a great question, and I think that first of all, one is better than none. And second of all, I would if you're gonna do like as few as possible, I would choose one biological and one mineral, or one that does both, kind of thing.
Okay.
Because again, that's taking the whole new model into consideration, taking what's living already and then feeding that, and then feeding the plants as well. Um, I don't think you would need to do all of them necessarily. It's more about knowing your soil, knowing what nutrients are present or are missing, and then tailoring your applications to that need. So knowing what nutrients you need, and then being like, oh, this amendment has a lot of it. This plant is providing a lot of it, a lot of this new mineral. So I need to apply that every 7 to 10 days, kind of thing.
So, as master gardeners are always big advocates of getting a soil test. So, soil test important, but also knowing what types of amendments a particular plant needs. I mean, some plants don't need much of anything. They seem to grow in the cracks of the sidewalk. And then
Yep.
others are kind of picky, like a tomato. They're kind of picky. They need a lot of love and attention to give me what I want for my tomato sandwich. So I guess the other thing is to look at what that plant needs as well,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, and to
figure
look
out
at
what. Yeah, go ahead.
what yeah, like the obvious signs of like if it's yellowing, or I think like is it if the tomato transplant is like purple, it's lacking like potassium or something like that?
Yeah, I've got some of those right now. Thank you
Yeah,
for
yeah. So
reminding
like
me.
if you just got familiar with like a little bit of plant health too, you would also know. Um and what's something else that's interesting, the weeds that are in your yard are indicators of what nutrients are there and which nutrients are lacking.
Or not.
Um,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that's something else you could get to know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I wish I had a good link I wish I knew a good book for that because I know there is one. I've just not been able to find it. But it's
Mm.
pretty much that whatever's growing in an area can indicate a lot about the soil, not just water content, but organic content too. Okay, she has a question about plant health and bugs. Go for it.
Yep.
Go ahead,
Gonna be
Kelly.
better if I just try to talk my way through this one. Okay.
Perfect.
So you said that usually if your plant's nice and healthy, you will not have many bugs because the sugar content is not usually what they're after. Is this different for strawberries?
You're saying like fruits?
Yeah, well, because I have a strawberry bed and I'm still kind of figuring it out. And it's on its year 3, so I did add like a bunch of additional amendments this spring, early spring, in order to try to see if I can kind of get another harvest out of it. And it grew really well. The green's really beautiful, and the strawberries are now reddening and getting nice and healthy and ripening. But a lot of there's like some earwigs in there and some slugs that are beating me to some of the ripe strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
So is that signs that there's some nutritional deficiencies going on, or is this like an acceptance to that they don't like sugar rule?
Yeah, I don't think it's an exception. Because okay, so I was gonna mention this at the beginning. The brick scale goes all the way, let's say it's like 1 to 12 or something like that, or 1 to 14. It's an not your typical number, but we in the United States have never even tasted what that would take. It's 18 is what it is. 1 to 18. No, somewhere over 20. Anyway, we in the United States have never tasted what a tomato of a brick score of 18 is. Like we have no idea what that even tastes like because none of our soil is that healthy.
Yeah.
So it's a very big possibility. Yeah, because strawberries are on here on the brick scale. So I assume, you know, maybe your brick scale is at like a 10 or like it might be a 10 or less, like where it's like average, but it's not excellent. It's not like at a 16 because other
Yeah.
insects are eating it. Not to not to say you're a bad strawberry gardener or anything.
Well, everything with gardening is a learning curve, and I've been well aware of this for a long time. So it's
Yeah.
also the part of the fun, It's a lot of
Mhm.
learning and adapting. So follow-up question. Uh, with regard to, I mean, especially the strawberries was where kind of I learned about this, was to remove all of the dead leaf material. And I guess I did that in early spring in order to reduce the likelihood for disease. So when we're talking about leaf mold being beneficial, is this any type of leaf, like including these kinds of strawberry leaves that have begun to decay from the previous year, or is it really leaf mold from trees exclusively?
Leaf mold is like it being mold is more about it being like a complex biology that's been breaking down for like 2 years and has like tons and tons of life on it. So like a leaf that you just like picked off and drop, even though it's like crinkling and probably being eaten by mold and that kind of thing, it's
Mm-hmm.
not what we mean when we say leaf mold. Like aged leaf mold, kind of like aged compost is like a complex like biological
Okay.
handful of yeah.
So when you're talking about an amendment with leaf mold, is that a product that you'd probably buy, the leaf mold itself, or is it something that if you have a pile of leaves, you can let sit for a long time?
The latter for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you can, and he talks about this, and I thought this was a great point. You can buy a lot of this stuff, right? You can buy
Hmm.
this stuff, specifically the biological things. Like you can buy those. You could buy fungi amendments and that kind of thing. You can buy leaf mold. Um, you can buy those, but the thing is, those were made somewhere else with a
Yeah.
soil that was different than yours,
Hmm.
which means the bacteria in that soil that you're purchasing from is different from the soil that yours is. So who's to say that the bacteria that was completely adjusted to a different environment is going to be dropped into this new world and make it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like the bacteria that's in your backyard, like let's just say you live in an ideal world and your backyard backs up into a forest and you can just walk over like scoop up a handful. That
Mhm.
stuff is so much more like the soil in your yard, and it's going
Mm.
to adapt so much better than stuff that's 500, 200 miles away,
That's
whatever.
good to know. Yeah, because we don't have any mature trees in our yard, but my house does back up to to a little forest that I could probably go get leaves from.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
I
Great.
just
Thank
take them from the side of the road when people put them in bags in the
Yes,
fall.
I've I've definitely debated on that in the fall.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why I got a pickup truck.
Yeah.
One
Keep your
reason.
leaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
And people look at you funny, but it's okay. You get over it after a while.
Mhm.
Okay, I had one more question. Seed soaking, which I don't think I've heard of that.
Mm.
I mean, that's really for vegetable seeds. I mean, are you really going to get much for doing, some kind of crazy flower seed or anything? Or is that, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, the same thing for me is like I've read in books, and the reason people can do microgreen businesses is that like the seed has everything it needs. And like my boss right now, for example, he does a microgreen business in the wintertime, and he buys this really cheap soil to put them in because they don't need anything.
Right.
Like they're gonna sprout up and they're gonna do just fine. So I think that might be another one of Nigel's interesting ideas of just like try it out, see what happens, and keep track of a couple different seeded crops. And maybe not all of them need it. Maybe none of them need it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting idea, but it does seem a little counterintuitive, if nothing else.
Hmm. Yeah, at least just unneeded.
Yeah. Yeah. So do we have any more questions, guys? These links are great. I'm going to go buy a book right now.
Good. Yeah, there's so many good books on Chelsea Green Publishing. It's crazy.
Well, so we're getting
Thank you.
several thank yous for your time and your information. This is wonderful. Now we're going to go out and make some stinky stuff to put all over our plants
I hope so. Send me
and get in trouble
pictures
with our
too.
HOAs. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Ian. This has been great. And hopefully our hack on recording this will work, and we'll post this out on the YouTube channel hopefully by the end of next week. So thank
That's
you
great.
all.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.